you. I'd like to go ahead and call our special meeting to order. It's May 6th. I had to look at my computer to see that. I would also like to apologize to everyone for being late. I missed the start time for this meeting, thinking it was 5 o'clock. So with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Seltzman to provide an overview of this evening's agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to the public. Good afternoon. The board will have an opportunity to review and discuss the capital bond and levy timeline options and priorities.
Thank you. If there's no discussion, we'll go ahead and adopt the agenda by general consent. Okay. We'll turn it over to Mr. Dunn to lead us through the presentation.
Good evening. I'll just get the presentation up on the screen here. Okay, just want to make sure that you can see the presentation on your screens.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good evening. So tonight is a capital levy planning meeting where we will be helping to provide the board a strong foundation for the next 4 meetings over the next 6 months, where we will be bringing the discussion around again and again related to whether or not to run a capital levy in February of 2022. The process will culminate in terms of the board's approval in November, when we will be asking you to consider approving that. I did want to point out that on the opening slide, you see 4 other presentations up there. Those are 4 other presentations that have already occurred over the last 6 months or so related to the same topic. So once again, we're going to go through the, to give you a strong foundation for the capital levy consideration. Overviews that will talk with you about the capital levy structure, provide you a little bit of the history, and frankly, I think the 3 of you could probably give this presentation to some degree. So I'm going to not spend a lot of time on this. I'll try to get through it fairly quickly.
Yes, perfectly.
Also, the capital facilities needs we'll cover, just to remind you about the 2020 capital bond program, and then talk with you about some potential options and what those options may cost and what the tax rates may be from that. So history, general fund levies, just general information. 25 have passed in the last 32 attempts. It's a fairly high success rate, about 78%. The last time we had a double levy failure was 1971, well before my time. Capital levies, we have only attempted 3, passed all 3, so they're batting 100%. You can see we passed one in 1992, and then 18 years later, passed another one, and then 6 years later, passed another one. Capital bonds, 8 passed in the last 23 attempts since 1968. 5 passed in the last 10 attempts since 1990, which is getting better. So this is another look at the same history, and then it looks out into the future, where we're planning at this point we're building our projections around the idea of running a bond every 6 years, a capital levy every 6 years, and a general fund levy every 4 years. So a quick primer about levies and bonds, how they differ. They're set up, both of them, to collect a specific dollar amount, and then the property tax rates are adjusted to allow us to collect those amounts. Levies, typically 4 to 6 years, bonds 15 to 20 years. As you know, levy threshold approval is simple majority, 50% plus 50% yes votes plus 1. Bond approval, supermajority, 60% plus a validation requirement. And again, I think you're all fairly familiar with this. Expenditures. When we get to capital levies, they do differ from capital bonds in that capital levies are typically used for capital projects of all types, but typically are not used for the real large projects. Generally because the tax rate impact is fairly high. The only school district I know of that has done much of that at all is Seattle, because it has such a high assessed valuation in its school district, it can do that. Most other districts, in fact, all the others that I know of, run bonds for the really large projects. I think we may have an opportunity to think a little bit about going down that road this time, but we'll see. So generally, for levies, we write the levy resolution in a way that allows us to use those monies over that 6-year time period for the highest priority needs that arise during that period. We usually do that by considering the projects that we know, or that we think we know we'll need during that time. But when it comes to actually spending the money, it's the highest priority needs. So for example, if you say you're going to do a roof, when you pass a resolution and 2 years later a different roof fails first, you will want to fix the roof that's failed first, even though you may be using the money that you were planning to spend on something else. That's different from a bond. A bond, we have the specific list in the bond resolution. We're pretty much committed to doing those projects, unless it turns out that, again, a higher priority need arises, and then it's a major deal to go through and change a bond resolution, because it actually has to change the resolution to make that happen. So that's it. There are also fewer restrictions on levies. You have more flexibility on what you can spend them for. So the last 3 capital levies, I'll keep bringing the conversation back to a levy, capital levy. The only 3 that you've ever run are up on there on the screen in terms of how they've been allocated. In 1992, $15 million, all of it was technology. 2010, $48 million total, $36.8 million technology, 11.2 maintenance. And then in 2016, just about 90 million. And again, the same percentage, roughly 2/3 of that was technology, 1/3 maintenance. So one of the questions along the way between now and November is going to be how much of the 2022 capital levy do you want technology versus maintenance? Recent property taxes, these are for the Everett Public Schools. The last line is an estimate. So what I'm saying for you in 2021 right now, the current total property tax rate for local school issues payable to the Everett Public Schools is $3.75 per thousand. You can see it's gone down pretty significantly over the last 4 or 5 years, related to, as you can see from that note on the bottom, increases in assessed valuations, which drives tax rates down. And we've been paying off our bonds. So as you pay off bond debt, your tax rates go down as well.
Can I ask a clarifying question right there, because I think it confuses a lot of people?
Yes.
That, yes, their property taxes go up as their assessed value goes up, but school district, we can only collect a certain dollar.
Yes.
So that schools, as much as a house in my neighborhood is sold for $1 million, it's not like we saw more money out of that house. We saw a dollar amount per 100,000.
Correct.
So it's not that we saw some percentage that went up. I think that's what confuses people.
And that is a message that we try very hard during, especially when we're running a bond or a levy, we try to explain numerous times.
Yeah, I think every time we can remind people that our hands are tied oftentimes with the dollar amount we can count it.
That's right.
It's agreed upon, voted upon dollar. Thank you.
So once again, as the assessed valuations go up, rates go down. Correct, right? We still collect the same dollar amount that was approved in the resolution and then the ballot measure that the voters approved. Okay, so here is a look at other school districts in the county, 2021 property tax rates. You can see they're listed in order of priority of total rates. So we're number 4 in the county right now, and at times we've been number 1. So this is currently we're at number 4. I will say that the rate that remember that we were there about 4 or 5 years ago, we were number 1. We were predicting if the 2020 bond had passed, we were estimating that we would have a stable tax rate at about 4.87. So if the bond had passed in 2020, we would be up near the top. We'd be number 2 right now. Right, so now I'm going to remind you what the 2020 bond proposal was composed of. Not in a lot of detail. I want to break it down by category. The reason is I'm going to walk you through 4 scenarios for a possible levy in 2022 that build on the components that were in the 2020 bond proposal, just to give you an idea. We're not going to ask you to vote on anything tonight. In fact, I don't want you to. I want you to wait until November. So what we're trying to do is to give you information so that you can have a conversation about it if needed, and then also the public can understand what we can get for the dollars and the tax rates that we may want to pursue over time. So this slide kind of speaks for itself, I think. Total amount of the bond, 317.4. And one of the things to think about too is we're 2 years later now, or will be with the 2022 bond or levy than we were with the 2020 bond. So the numbers that we used in the 2020 bond proposal, to use them in the 2022 levy, we're escalating them by 8%. So that's why the numbers won't quite add up if you're looking at the math on this. So I'm going to cover a couple topics along with the reminder about what the 2020 bond proposal was composed of. One of the big projects in that bond proposal was to add elementary school classroom space. And this slide here illustrates that we still have the need to do that. In the 10 years from now, out to 2030, you can see that we're predicting that we will have about the equivalent of 3 elementary schools, more students than with our permanent building space. We'll still house them, but they'll be in portables unless we build permanent space. At the middle school level, it's about a half of a middle school by 2030, and then at the high school, we actually do not foresee right now that we'll be over our capacities at high school by 2030. So the next topic I'm going to cover before we get into the scenarios, there's a couple more. One is the Clean Buildings Act. This is recent, 2019 legislation, state legislation that obligates us to spend money to provide cleaner buildings. That's the simple way to say it. We expect it's going to cost, and every time I say this, my Darcy Walker, the facilities planning director, he kind of, grimaces, and that's because we don't even know what's going to cost. I'm saying 15 million or more. He's always saying, yeah, and probably more. So we have people working on it right now, and the state actually hasn't fully completed the writing of the rules that implement that legislation. So we're not even quite sure what the rules are yet, but we're working on it.
It's a mandate without funding?
It's the mandate for all owners of buildings, public, private, anyone in the state that owns a building over 50,000 square feet.
At own expense.
At their own expense. And it's not forward-looking. I mean, it's retroactive. So it goes back in time and says any building that you own at all that's over 50,000 square feet within a phased-in time frame that's over, I think, 3 years, has to comply. So the buildings that we have that will need to comply are listed right there in the second bullet. But it applies to private owners as well.
Is this required for any kind of modernization or refurbishment of any kind?
No, it's not even required if you do a modernization. It's required, period.
Period.
If you own a building 50,000 square feet or more in the state, you have to comply.
And so the fact that we have those sister elementary schools that have separate buildings, they're not in this because each building is not 50,000.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the good distinction. That's why Tembark, our Forest View Elementary, is up there. And those other schools that are like the Clone, Mill Creek Silver First Cedar that have the campus style layout, their buildings are all lower under that. So that is an implication. Now, I mean, looking forward, I wouldn't use that as a reason to go back to the campus style layout, but it's an implication of how it applies to us. So now I'm going to ask Brian Bentley to.
Yes, good afternoon. I would like to share the technology portion of the levy proposal, the levy discussion. And for this portion, the estimated cost of this would be $96 million over 6 years. And I've listed here the key projects within that $96 million. I'll just highlight some of what that means underneath those bullets. The majority of the cost is in the project category of one-to-one initiative sustainability. The continuing the program of providing one computer for each student in the district. In this project, computers will be replaced when their warranty expires, which is typically every 4 years. So it's continuing that cycle that we started in the 2016 levy. We'll also include laptops for instructional paraeducators and certificated staff, and then those will be replaced on a refresh cycle once their warranty expires. And we'll also continue and expand our Wi-Fi connection capability off campus as part of that as well. During remote learning, we expanded our customer service, adding students and parents as customers, so to speak, and included in the sustainability project is continuing that model moving forward. Expanding another project under professional development and technology instructional facilitators is expanding the number of those. We see the need for really increasing and supporting our teaching staff with job embedded coaches and those technology facilitators over the course of the 6 years of the levy. So that is built into this project as well, ensuring that we move from just the acquisition of technology to actually utilizing at a higher level other than substitution. And we've talked to you about that in our various presentations. For the device lifecycle management project and upgrades, we will be updating to the multimedia classroom display systems across the district, moving from more of a projector based to interactive projectors and interactive whiteboards, similar to what you see at Tambark and at North and our newer schools. Updating our office computers, replacing computers for classified staff and printers. That's part of that device lifecycle management. In infrastructure projects, we want to update and expand our security camera, data and cybersecurity projects as well. Upgrade our Wi-Fi access points. We just completed that project with this levy. We'll want to build that into the next one as well. Accessing our servers, our routers, our bandwidth, all that stuff, which was so important in the 2016 levy that we built that in when we switched to remote learning, that we were able to make that transition because we had the capability to do so. Subscription continues to be the trend, so we've expanded in this project, especially in the operational side, a greater capacity to increase operational subscriptions, but also increasing instructional and ensuring that these digitized curriculum adoptions, you're hearing there's a digital component to all of those, that there's capacity in this budget to allow for the upgrades of those digital portion of those curriculum adoptions.
Does it offset textbooks? Isn't those completely digital when it comes out of the budgets change over, so it might not be more money, it's just different buckets?
Yeah.
Or is it additional money?
Well, it ensures that when there is those subscriptions are upgraded as part. I don't know that it eliminates the need for textbooks, but that the subscription portion of it would be updated.
All right, so now we get into the first of 4 illustrative options. Once again, no vote tonight. We're not asking you to. I'm just going to be explaining, using these based on what Brian presented, plus the 2020 capital bond proposal projects, plus the Clean Buildings Act monies. So we're going to package that up in various ways and walk you through what that would cost and what the tax rates would be. So the first one is illustrative option number 1 of $144 million over 6 years. Estimated property tax rate 4.5. Includes $96 million for technology, as Brian walked you through that. It also includes $48 million, which is the amount that it would take to build all of the HVAC upgrade projects, roofing, flooring, safety, and security, and site improvement projects from the 2020 capital bond proposal. Plus, it would do the Clean Buildings Act. That's what you would get for $144 million. Tax rate, 4.56. As a reminder, if the bond had passed, we would be at 4.87, we had thought at the time. We actually got updates later on some numbers, but that's what we thought at the time. And our current rate is 3.75. 3.75. $3.75. All right, that's illustrative option number one. Number two is what you'll see as we go through this, I'm going to keep adding to that. Illustrative option number two is everything I just said, plus $86 million to do all of the modernize and upgrade school projects from the 2020 bond proposal. So what this means is all of those projects at Cascade High School and Everett High School and Jackson High School that supported the STEM Career Connected Pathway programs. Those were the big pieces. It also did the Civic Auditorium building at Everett High, and it did the science building at Cascade, science building at Everett High, some upgrades. Then it finished the vocational building at Everett High, and then it did some science projects at Jackson. So that's an additional $86 million to the first scenario. So the total cost $230 million over 6 years. Tax rate bumps up to $504 per $1,000, $5.04. Illustrative option number three, same thing, I'm going to add to this. The next bullet is $50 million to kick off the full new and blue replacement of Jackson Elementary School on top of all those other projects. And so that adds $50 million to the total, so it's $280 million. Property tax rate estimated $5.31 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. And then the last one is going to be really simple. It does every project in the 2020 capital bond proposal, plus the Clean Buildings Act improvements for $15 million, plus the $96 million for technology. $445 million over 6 years, estimated property tax rate $6.24 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. Again, for illustration, just to give you a range, just a quick note, the assumptions that we used in these tax rate projections, again, levies and bonds every 6 years, general fund levy every 4 years, that these will be approved by the voters, and that the assessed valuations of the properties in the district will increase by 3% a year. We've seen higher than that increases lately, but we are looking at long term. So over a 25-year period, we're predicting an average of 3%. Some years it may not go up in those 25 years. So 3% a year, and that the projections come in close to Les Kendrick's mid-range projections. And the reason that matters is because it affects the general fund levy amount. And I said that we're going to be coming back to you 4 different times between now and November, and those are the dates. The next time is actually in 3 weeks. If needed, we were going to be having a special board meeting to help answer questions that might come up tonight that we weren't able to answer, plus any other information you might need. August 17 is my assumption that you may want to talk about this at the summer workshop. It has been a regular at the last 7 or 8 workshops in the summer, so I thought it was probably going to happen. And then in October is the meeting when we would bring a draft resolution for your review and consideration and guidance, and then the approval on November 23rd. With that, finishes our presentation, and welcome you to ask any questions that you may have.
I have a question. Going back to slide number 10, where you start talking about the property tax rates in Sonoma County, you mentioned that Everett's total tax rate now is 3.75. Has it at every time at any time been greater than 3.75, and what was that limit was?
It's over six.
Let me, the previous slide will answer the question, at least this slide here, slide 9 shows what our overall tax rate was for from 2017 to 2021.
That was the highest it is.
Oh, I'm sorry,
It was higher than that prior to these
Yes.
dates. Yeah, it was in 655, I believe was the highest.
yeah, I sent some information out earlier today on that, so hold on just a second, I'll try to answer that.
Okay. Because I thought so too, but I didn't see it here, so I was wondering when that might have been.
So I have some information, and this, by the way, I won't put it up on the screen, but it's something that we have presented to you in your August workshop in 2019. It shows a stable, shows the tax rates for a long period of time, and it shows that in 2013, our overall tax rate was $6.53, $6.53. I don't know if that is the highest ever that we experienced, but I know that it's much higher than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess with the tax rates, if I might jump in with the discussion here, what I'm trying to understand is how much were people paying? So it's this whole moving target between tax rates, appreciation of home values, increasing dollar amounts on capital projects. And I'm just having a hard time understanding, and this is not something I expect an answer tonight, but it maybe a way to better understand this is, what did someone pay for capital projects to the district at an average home price 4 years ago or 5 years ago versus, if we were to approve X kind of thing? Are people paying more taxes, I guess is what I'm really trying to understand.
So let me, if you don't mind, say that back to you, so make sure I understand. And Ruth is going to be, she said she would be listening and taking notes for this tonight, so please do that. So far, I've been presenting to you tax rates. I think what you're looking for are the actual dollars that have been paid by homeowners for maybe the last, in the same time frame, 2017 to now. Would that be, answer the questions you're looking for? Okay.
I guess, and every home is different.
Yes.
Some go up, some go down, most don't, some stay flat. But the question is, are we, if we were to choose A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, or whatever, are we imposing a significant tax increase on people, or is it sort of in the ballpark of what they were paying, but it's slightly elevated because of inflation and things like that?
We will try to come up with some information that,
I'm just kind of looking at the ballparks.
Yeah, the guest
averages, like average home value and that kind of thing.
and I'm just thinking some of the complication there that we'll try to work through is over time, more houses are built. Our assessed valuations go up because of that, plus also because prices go up.
Right.
So we'll have to take a look at all of that and try to come up with kind of a.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, I know it's more complicated, I want to be able to, address, because tax sensitivity is clearly an important issue when we discuss capital levies and things. And any kind of background information, and I know my question is kind of complex in terms of all the moving parts, but any sort of, framework, I guess, you could provide us would be really helpful.
Okay.
And she did let me clarify my question, so that the $1 million house, their taxes are set in April, so if they're just sold at $1 million, when it gets reassessed in October, all those assessments come out, and then if every house in my neighborhood starts selling for $1 million, then everybody's tax rate goes down because we can only collect $25 million out of all of those houses. It's not like we're collecting, because all those houses went up, we can collect 25% of every house.
That's
we
right.
can only collect 25 million, so that's part of why some of these tax rates have gone down, because the house rates have gone up. It's not just that we're charging fewer taxes.
That's right. It's
That's a
an
complicated
increase in
story,
assessed
though.
valuation
Yeah.
as as the value of the properties in our school district rise, the average tax rates go down for the same dollar amount that we're collecting. What complicates it, of course, is we're talking school-related property taxes. Cities and counties and other jurisdictions have the ability to impose a tax
Another tax.
that would increase with the assessed valuations going up. They may collect 5%, no, let's be real, maybe 1%. And so if the value goes up by a certain amount, those cities and counties that can tax that way will get more money.
So
So,
see, we can't control what other municipalities or other districts will then impose on the community. We can only affect what we know that.
I think we have to be aware of it so that.
So we need to be aware of.
how to communicate that is hard. That's one of the challenges, because what we're saying and what the taxpayers are experiencing don't seem to match.
Yes.
And it's a hard
It's a
thing to
hard
explain.
sell,
Yeah.
and it's a challenge.
And I think that is because we're talking at 0.5%, but then we're talking $4 and when I look at my tax bill, I don't know if education comes up first or Sonoma County comes up first. Not that we're public schools in Sonoma County, but depending on who comes up first, might be getting a hit for why their tax bill is, even though they might not be each really driving that bill. I mean,
Yes.
we're listed on there, so we could be getting hit even though we're not driving it.
Right.
Can I ask a question about the collection, or do you want questions about the rate? I don't want to change that.
Are you finished?
Okay, because I just did the quick, however, 144 million divided by 6 months, divided by 2 times a year, 6 years divided by 2 times a year. So in a bond, if we need 150 million to go buy and build that school, we can sell $150 million worth of bonds. Thank you for nodding. And then, but with this, if we do say the 230 million, we only get 19 million every 6 months. We would have to bank that, because you can't start building a building. We have to bank it until we got them 100 million to do their project.
That's the most likely scenario, yes. So the reality is that with a levy, you take 6 years divided into 6-month increments, so you get 12 payments over 6 years. So you get the money, you can spend the money up to get it. There are some vehicles that we could use that we could actually get a loan against the future payments, but it's complicated. We haven't done that before.
Yeah.
So, it's a complication that we haven't actually gone for. So you're right.
But that's where our difference and our, like, when I believe Seattle, when they go out for these, I mean, they're $1 billion capital levies, which means they're getting a bigger pool every 6 months.
They can build 5 schools with the first payment.
But if ours is,
Yeah.
our biggest is half of that, only getting 37 million, it's gonna take us 4 or 5 cycles to be able to build that elementary school.
Yes, and we would have to.
Which delays the elementary school build.
Right. So if we were to include, for example, Jackson Elementary new and little replacement, we would have to come up with a schedule and a plan and be able to communicate that during the season after we approve until the election, to make sure people understand what they would be getting.
Yeah, I mean, I see delay. Because we can't sell the money when we need the money.
Right.
Because we don't control when money comes in. We're affected by what comes in.
I have a question on top of that one. When you said we have to bank it, what about state matching funds?
Mhm.
Is it possible that we would still be able to receive through the levy cycle, the levy process, state matching funds that could help us build something instead of banking the funds until we have accumulated the total amount?
So that is possible if we're eligible for state funding. A reminder, though, that we are currently only eligible for SCAP funds, State Construction Assistance Program funds, for modernization projects. So for this levy, the only project on any of these scenarios that would be eligible, that would generate state funding, would be Jackson Elementary School.
Yes.
And then maybe those high school modernization projects. None of the new construction would generate funds. We could use some of the state funding that we have been receiving generated from the current bond and levy projects. Actually, it's the current bond projects. But that money has been, we do a long-range cash flow, and that money, we have plans for how that would be used, because it wasn't like we have a lot left. So in other words, use of that money and planning on how to use it would not take away the need for this capital levy.
And also to confirm, we get state matching after a project is near completion or completed.
Towards the end, we can.
So it's not helpful in building the project.
Right, and it would not help us get away from a banking scenario that you would mention, yeah.
I have a question on another, I guess, tax question, might need some follow-up, but what would the tax rate increase be if we just did the technology and the 15 million for the Clean Buildings Act? And I guess I'm curious on just that dollar amount, because in looking at the scenario where we add all the bond projects in, we're at a 624 tax rate, and then we would add in, whereas if the bond had passed, it would have been a 487 tax rate plus whatever that additional money was for the 96 tax.
Right.
Which I imagine would put us somewhere in the 5 range. And
If we pass the bond?
so what I'm saying is, if we pass the bond, yes, thank you. We passed the bond and we added just the technology piece to in the capital levy, it would still be lower, significantly lower, a fair amount lower than putting the bond into a capital levy.
Yes. And
I want to make that point really clear.
yeah. Okay. So, and I would just state or tell you once again, I've told you before many times, one of the primary differences between bonds and levies is how much it costs over time, and in how much it impacts the tax rates over time. So bonds and levies, for the same dollar amount, a bond will have a lower tax rate because the repayment period is 15 to 20 years. Instead of having a 6-year repayment like a levy, it's a 15 to 20. It's like a mortgage. You can borrow the same amount with a 6-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage. You're going to pay more over time on that 15-year mortgage because you have 9 more years of repayments.
Yes, it would be
So-
great if we could educate our voting public on that.
Yeah.
It's
So,
just difficult because,
Right.
it's backwards. It's harder to pass a bond, but it's less expensive to build capital projects with a bond in our district.
yes, and the most cost-effective way to build things is through a levy. It also has the higher tax rates for a shorter period of time, and it's hard to convey how attractive that should be.
I had a couple questions for Brian. I'm curious, I was looking, so in 2016, the tech piece of our capital levy was 69.7, and this time it is 96. So, a pretty significant increase, and I'm just curious if the pandemic sort of fueled some of those additional costs. So we have more computers out that we deployed earlier, we have more hotspots, we're offering more support for all of that equipment, and then and more software. Is that true?
Yes, I would say that the biggest increase areas is in that there's more things out there that are now need to be refreshed and sustained. So the one-to-one sustainability project, that's the biggest chunk of this, and that is one of the as we increase more devices, sustaining those is a big cost
So the
increase.
actual purchasing the devices is the largest piece of that 96.
That and the professional development part, the piece for adding the increasing, ensuring that that's sustained over the 6-year cycle is another big difference. So I would probably say the sustainability part with the hardware, the professional development, and again, really increasing that subscription bandwidth to allow for, that really continues to be the direction, and we just didn't have enough in the 2016. So we really wanted to expand. Those would probably be the main areas. But the pandemic really did illustrate the need, brought out the need for some of these increases. But those would be the main areas of difference.
Thank you. And on the subscriptions, so, you know, subscriptions are becoming more costly as we reduce the amount of hard copies, books that we buy, textbooks that we buy. What part of those falls into a tech levy versus our operating budget for an adoption? Like, where does one begin and the other end? And
Yes.
because I would think a lot of subscriptions are replacing the hard costs of the materials.
Yeah.
Maybe Shelley.
Yeah, maybe Shelley
Can I
step
just join
in.
you guys at
Yes.
the podium?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we're doing with upcoming adoptions is we're including looking at digital e-packages, so that if we're buying something that has consumables, we also have digital subscriptions for those materials. It's become, and actually working with Ryan's team, part of the more robust part of the adoption process, because what we have learned in the last 13 months is that is a really important thing for us to have. Because if we can't get kids the materials, paper, pencil, we need to have an opportunity to be able to do that digitally. And it capitalizes on the digital tools and resources. For example, the high school adoption with Desmos, a tool that could be utilized either in person in the classroom or virtually, provides kids an opportunity to manipulate numbers and graphs in a very real way. So when we do adoption processes, we are looking for those pieces to be included in the purchase price of the actual curriculum.
Thank
So-
you.
Yeah.
Explain to me then, when you start talking about subscription, if we're through the adoption process, if we purchase it with that included, we then do not have to pay subscriptions?
It depends on the publisher, so there may be, it depends on whether or not the tool is like a subscription, an annual subscription that we would use as like a consumable. So when we do an adoption and we purchase a consumable workbook, for example, that's a cost that we have to re-up every year. There are some curricula that do not have consumables, meaning I buy a textbook, I can utilize that textbook until I buy a new textbook. So with some of the materials that we're adopting, there could be some things that are consumable costs. So we could say it's a subscription to this particular web app, or what we're finding more is that the publishers are including those applications within the purchase price. So there are some new adoptions, we're looking at that as the purchase price. Current adoptions that we have added things to, it may be a subscription.
I feel like we're at this tipping point between hard and, computerized and still can't get rid of all the books, but certainly a more robust subscription and online presence with a one-to-one rollout.
And having a combination of e-textbooks and textbooks has been beneficial for this very circumstance that we're in.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so much
You
for
bet.
adding that. Records, other questions?
I think it would just be interesting to see what that 445 looks like in bond and capital levy.
I keep your,
Oh,
just a
sorry.
little closer.
Sorry, thank you.
Yes.
How that 445 looks in is capital capital levy for part of it, and then bond for part of it. What that tax rate would look like. And I don't know, because we can put some of that HVAC clean building tax into the capital levy versus bond, like, what's the best way to divide that up? And
Well, let me try this. The tax rates that we put together are based on a repeated sequence of bond and levy passings in the future. So in this scenario, we've already planned a capital bond of $300+ million will be passed in 2024. That's already built into this tax rate
With
structure.
new projects that weren't part of the 2020.
Well, we haven't decided which projects would go on those bonds yet. But frankly, if the need is still there, I assume it would be if we've not done it some other way, then you could say the tax rate projections that you see for these options here already assume that in 2024 we'll pass a capital bond of, and I think that the number was $300+ million. So you could say $300 million of these projects would go on the next bond.
It depends, so if we went with, for example, option 2 or 3, any of the projects that were in the bond that aren't in those capital levy options
Yeah.
would then be the highest priority for the next bond attached, or bond package.
But this 6.24 is what is included here, the 6.24, a 300, for example, $1 million bond package in 2 years will add to 6.24, or 6.24 includes bandwidth for 300 million in 2 years?
The latter. The 6.24 that you see on the screen right now assumes every 6 years we're going to pass a bond, beginning in 2024, and every 6 years we're going to pass a capital levy, and every 4 years we're going to pass a general fund levy. The way to think about it is this: in the future, we know we're going to need money to replace those schools that's on the 48-year modernization cycle. Do you remember those?
Mm-hmm.
So that modernization cycle alone requires a capital bond funding component on a regular basis. And we haven't passed one to do that since 2016. So the next one would be 2024 is when we would start using the capital bond capacity to hit those projects on the major modernization cycle. Is this helping?
It does, but just an interesting thing with our community is when we tell them we're not going to raise your taxes, they still will go for it. So.
I know, it's,
They voted
That's not
60%.
true, 58.8% of our community voted for it.
I tried to correct myself, but you caught me, so thank you.
yes, and you know, I'll point out the obvious, that levies only need 50%.
And that's what, and
That's really one of the, well, it's the unique characteristic of a levy that makes it worth considering putting larger projects on, even though they're a higher property tax rate.
I have one more question, if I can. I don't mean to be the dead horse, and I apologize if it appears that I am. But would you mind putting up on the screen option 3? And then what I will do is look at
I'll give you one.
this. Right.
Right.
I got it. Oh, I apologize. Option 3 on the screen. When I look at 86 million all modernize and upgrade school projects from the 2020 bond,
Yes,
and I look at modernize and upgrade 3 spaces at 3 high schools at 79.8 million. And I've already added the HVAC in for, I'm looking at page 11.
yes.
And I already added the 48 million plus the $15 million improvement. What am I missing? Because I'm trying to add that into option 3.
Okay,
And I
so
can't seem to get the numbers to fit.
option 3 includes all of what you see on the screen there, except for the top 2 bullets.
The top 2 bullets, it does not include them?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I think it may include Jackson Elementary School then, let me check real quick. Okay, yeah, so option 3 includes I'll go back to that slide you were on in a minute. It includes everything I just said plus Jackson Elementary, so going back to slide 11. So option 3 includes everything that you see on the screen except for the first bullet and except for 2 elementary schools in the second bullet.
Okay,
So it includes everything else except for what I just said.
okay.
Yeah.
Everything else but the top 2 bullets.
Yes,
And then when they add, Jackson, that's part of the top, the
That's part of-
second bullet.
part of option 3.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha. All right.
And with Jackson being high priority because of ADA or for another reason?
Numerous reasons, including ADA. The primary ones were the plumbing and water, the sanitary sewer and water piping systems are shot. We're constantly repairing those. For quite a while, I had about an 8-foot section in my office, and I think it had 4 different repairs within that 8-foot section. And I'm just using it to show people what we're trying to do out there.
We need to put that in the lobby.
Yeah, I know it's down at the maintenance department. We could put it in the lobby.
It's one of our artifacts.
Yes.
I just always looked for the first time I walked into Madison, I'm like, these hallways are wider than the ceiling in this hall. I think, but I felt very tall
Pretty close, yeah.
in that building. Okay. Thank you.
So once again, we have 4 more opportunities between now and November. The next one is in about 3 weeks, June 1. Yeah, that's right, June 1. Is that 3 weeks? June 1?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay, 3 weeks from now, on June 1, we have another special board meeting, and we'll look forward to bringing whatever you have already asked for, and whatever else we think might be pertinent, we'll bring it forward.
And I would like to request at some point that possibly you and Brian could give the 2 directors that cannot make it, given they are our newer directors, and probably would appreciate or need some of this background information. Apologize for the duplication of work.
I really appreciate learning more about the capital budgets. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, well, at this point, we will go ahead and adjourn this special meeting. Thank you, everyone, for being here in person this evening, and have a lovely evening.